Beijing has been playing a very long game. For decades, they've been buying Iranian oil on the cheap, redesigning a Middle East in their image, watching America bleed itself dry in endless wars that literally went nowhere, and quietly assuming that one day they would inherit the world. Well, Operation Epic Fury just blew that plan to pieces because right now the Iranian regime is crumbling under a blockade. Beijing is watching 40 to 50% of its oil supply get cut off at the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States just quietly walked through the other door, signing a major defense cooperation partnership with Indonesia that puts American eyes and assets directly on the Strait of Malacca, Beijing's single most important choke point. Stick with me to the very end of this video because we're about to get a masterclass on what 4D chess really looks like on the world stage and the geopolitical checkmate that Beijing never saw coming. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, enjoying yet another exciting, glorious, wonderful day in the Trumpian golden age that you made possible back in November 2024. So if you want a front row seat on how you continue to change the world in ways you never even imagined, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. The Iranian regime is collapsing. The U.S. naval blockade is literally squeezing what's left of Iranian forces like a boa constrictor. Now, keep in mind, this is a regime that was already dying before the first American bomb fell. Iran's rial, their currency, had already lost 60% of its value before Operation Epic Fury even began. Food inflation had surged to 105% year over year. Unemployment was running at 30 to 40% in real terms. The regime had already issued its largest ever currency denomination, a 10 million rial note, just a month after putting a 5 million rial note into circulation because the money is so pathetically worthless. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, estimated that inflation would stay above 40% throughout the entire year of 2026. And again, this is before a single American B-2 took off from Diego Garcia. Now, on top of that disaster, add the war. Add Iranian factories, energy facilities, bridges, railways, all completely destroyed. The petrochemical sector is running at maybe half capacity. The regime has cut off internet access for 47 straight days. Their own Ministry of Telecommunications admitted this is costing the economy upwards of $40 to $50 million a day. Tax revenue, which is 43% of government income, has collapsed. And now the blockade of the Persian Gulf, remember, the Persian Gulf accounts for 90% of Iran's trade. The U.S. Navy has closed it in the first 24 hours of that blockade. Not a single Iranian-associated ship passed. The lifeline has been completely cut off. Remember, Iran deceived itself into thinking that closing the Strait of Hormuz was their nuclear option. They thought it was their ace in the hole, right? Their last card. They played it, and then Trump saw their hand and raised them infinity. U.S. naval forces officially and effectively blockaded Iran. We blockaded their blockade. The Gulf accounts for over 90% of Iran's trade. Saudi Arabia has overland east to west pipelines that are fully operational, extending through the Red Sea. So the Gulf states have diversified their economies. America is a net energy exporter. Iran has none of those alternatives. So the regime played its supposed nuclear option, and they lost. It backfired spectacularly on themselves. Every day they get weaker as we get demonstrably stronger. And again, the calculus here is simple. Sustain the blockade long enough that the regime simply cannot pay the IRGC or the Basij, the law enforcement forces, no paycheck for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and those forces step down. The regime, remembers, built its legitimacy largely through patronage and bribes. And once the money dries up, loyalty to the regime dries up as well. Once the money dries up, soldiers defect, they strike, they go home. And as history has shown time and time and time again, the moment the army decides It's going to lay down its weapons. It's not going to fire. The government falls. The regime only has about 10 to 15% domestic support remaining. Its leaders have not been seen in public since the war began. They're just simply too terrified of the same precision strikes that took out their nuclear program. I mean, this is not a regime winning a war. This is a regime trying to literally survive the week. So, enter China. Beijing has been watching all of this very carefully, and they are petrified. I mean, take a look at this. This came out today. China's export growth collapsed to just 2.5% in March. That's down from a 22% surge in January and February. That is a catastrophic deceleration. Gasoline prices in China have already jumped 11% since the war began. That price surge is now hitting tens of millions of jobs, particularly in China's chemical and refining industries. Remember, China gets roughly 45 to 50% of its imported crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran alone was supplying about 11% of China's total oil imports. And the U.S. blockade is structured brilliantly. It doesn't just stop ships going to Iranian ports. It stops any ship that's paid a transit toll to Iran while passing through the strait. So in effect, China's Persian Gulf oil supply is being completely choked off, or at least severely limited. So Beijing accused Washington of being irresponsible and dangerous and reckless. A couple of Chinese ships tried to test the blockade. They turned around. Now, China does have significant strategic reserves, just over 1 billion barrels in storage, which buys them, a couple of months, 3-4 months of breathing room. But as Heritage Foundation senior fellow Steve Yates puts it, China is frankly being forced to choose for the first time. For years, they played both sides. They got American oil, and they got Iranian oil. But now they can't. And they can't because Trump has just made a single move that may have permanently checkmated Beijing on the international stage for the rest of the century and beyond. Wait until you see this. Here's the masterstroke that most people are missing entirely. While the world was watching Hormuz, the Trump administration quietly walked through another door. On April 13th, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth signed a major defense cooperation partnership with Indonesia. The deal includes expanded joint training, deployed sensors, integrated American surveillance technology, joint special forces training, and co-development of next-generation maritime and subsurface autonomous systems. And what does all of this look at? The Strait of Malacca is a narrow sea lane between the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra, connecting the Indian Ocean with the South China Sea. And approximately 23 million barrels of oil pass through it every single day. Now, that's 29% of all global seaborne oil trade. And nearly half of those shipments go where? You guessed it, to China. So now do you understand what just happened here? At Hormuz, we've cut off China's Persian Gulf oil supply. At Malacca, we now have sensors, surveillance technology, joint forces, and overflight access that effectively puts American eyes and assets on China's other great energy lifeline, Malacca. This is what checkmate looks like in geopolitics. It doesn't happen with one dramatic stroke. It happens quietly, methodically, piece by piece, until one morning Xi Jinping wakes up and realizes that the board has been completely rearranged under American control while he was busy threatening Taiwan. And Beijing knows it. The Iran war has exposed that China is simultaneously immensely dependent on the U.S. market for its export-led growth model and immensely dependent on imported energy that transits waterways the United States now effectively controls. The reserves it thought gave it room to maneuver on Taiwan, they're all being used up to make up for the Hormuz closure. The Iran relationship that gave it cheap oil and a strategic partner, that regime's gone. It's crumbling. And the geopolitical posture China spent 20 years building in the Middle East, presenting itself as the peacemaker, the alternative to American hegemony, just got humiliated. Because when it mattered, Beijing did nothing. The Iranian war, whatever you think of it, has undeniably handed the United States a strategic position in the Indo-Pacific that we could not have purchased at any price. 2 choke points, one on each side of China's energy supply chain. A crumbling rival regime, a panicked Beijing being forced to choose sides for the first time, and an Iranian people Trump told directly, when we're done, go back and take your country. The golden age that you made happen in November 2024 is playing 4-dimensional chess that is changing the world right before our very eyes for generations to come.